Hello folks. Today I'm answering a question from Rochelle, who's asked, what is the prosperity gospel and how do you avoid being trapped in it? My first introduction to the prosperity gospel occurred when I was a teenager and I was participating in an AOG church. And some of the folk there had been influenced by Yonggi Cho and Hagen and other particular people of that stream of thought and theology. The basic premises is that God's desire is that we should be healthy, wealthy, and successful, and that that should be the norm for Christian life and living. In simple way of understanding it, we used to call it the blab it, grab it theology. So if you believed it, claimed it right, you'd get it. One way of expressing it is that God's desire is that we're all successful, and in that success we prove that we are legitimate children of God. Of course, there's also the belief that if you're sick, then you're sick because you haven't got enough faith, or there is a sin at work in your life, and that sin has opened you up to some sort of physical illness. So some of the people that have been influential in this theology of Kenneth Copeland and Gloria Copeland. There's what is called the father of the hyper faith or prosperity doctrine, E.W. Kenyon. He was born 1867 and died 1948. He was an evangelist and a pastor and the founder of Bethel Bible Institute. His belief was that the right words create your reality, and also confess what you will possess was a phrase that he used. Late in the 1940s, we have Oral Roberts, who burst onto the religious scene with his ministry of alleged healings and financial prosperity. Then we've got, of course, our most recognised people of today, Hagen, who died in 2003. And some of the other names that you may know is Kenneth Hagin Jr., Kenneth Copeland, of course, Frederick Price, Robert Tilton, Benny Hinn, Charles Capps and Jerry Saville, and Creflin Dollar, I think he's called, and there are many others. So there's quite a few who represent it. It appears the key issue is that success in this world is linked to your faith, and God's desire is that you should be successful in every area of your life. I have to be honest, in my opinion, these people are not very sensible biblically or logically. Part of the problem we've got is a simple thought process. If, for example, it's God's will that we're prosperous, we have to understand what that means in the world that we live in, this temporal sphere. Say it's God's will that I have as much money as I could possibly desire in evidence of my faith. Say I want to be a millionaire. Let's be bold. I want to have $5 million. Say I claim it in faith and I believe it in faith, and God's desire is that I prosper because I have claimed it and I've believed it faithfully. So I have delivered to me in some way $5 million as a blessing from God. Here goes the catch. For me to gain $5 million, it means it has to come from somewhere else. There is no such thing as production of money from a vacuum. That would create an inflation issue which would collapse the economy very quickly. So for me to get that $5 million, I have to have it taken from somebody who is less fortunate. That means others have to suffer that I might prosper. And in so doing that, if that were the case, my prosperity creates suffering for other people. Now, the argument then is that God can make money out of nothing. No, he can't. That is not logical. If that occurred, he would create an insurmountable amount of suffering in the world, just because changing the economics of the system would create economic collapse and also inflation and devaluing of goods and trade. It is not sensible. It lacks a whole series of sensible thinking. And of course someone will say, but Malcolm, that's intellectualizing everything. No, it's not. It's not just intellectualizing. It's being pragmatic and sensible. The fact that we in the West pursue money as a form of success and a form of identity probably tells us that prosperity theology is more linked to westernized thinking and greed and capitalism and materialism than it is to spirituality, humility, and Christ-like servanthood. I want to quote a statement from Joel Osteen, who has, through his media and books, popularized this this teaching in a new way to a new generation of Christians. He says it in a modern way, but he still says it in such a manner that he's blending secularism with Christian thinking. And this is how he promotes his ideas in 7 Steps to Living at Your Full Potential. Start calling yourself healed, happy, whole, blessed, and prosperous. Stop talking to God about how big your mountains are, and start talking to your mountains about how big your God is. He also says, you have to learn to follow your heart. You can't let other people pressure you into being something that you're not. If you want God's favor in your life, you must be the person he made you to be. Not the person your boss wants you to be, not even the person your parents or your husband wants you to be. You can't let outside expectations keep you from following your own heart. Again, from 7 Steps to Living Your Full Potential. There's a little bit of an issue with that. And let's go through a thought process to maybe explain why there's a fallacy there. So I'm to be true to myself and true to my own heart, and I'm not allowed to let other people influence how I function and who I am. Well, there goes every job that you're going to be hired for potentially being lost, because when you're employed to be an employee, you're employed to function in such a way that brings the identity of that company, good reputation, and reflects the ideals and hopes and expectations of that company. In Joe Osteen's attitude, it's kind of like saying to your boss, stuff off, I'm going to do it my way. I don't care that you're paying my salary. I can do it whatever way I want to. That's the pragmatics. So it doesn't work in the practical form, but it also doesn't work in the spiritual form, because in the Bible we're taught that we are to die to self. We're to take up our cross and die to self. And that's because God does actually have an expectation for us to not go to the lowest denominator, what is driven by my heart. And my heart is deceptive above all else, just as everyone else's hearts are. We're very selfish, and at the core of our being, we can be extraordinarily small-minded. Jesus puts it this way. Matthew 6:19-24, section of it. Do not accumulate for yourself treasures on earth, where moth and rust destroy and where thieves break in and steal. But accumulate for yourselves treasures in heaven, where moth and rust do not destroy and thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. No one can serve 2 masters, for either he will hate the one and love the other, or he will be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and money. And there is the problem, the prosperity doctrine. At the heart of it, whether they want to admit it or not, they see accumulation of wealth as spiritual success. And really that's undoing a whole series of logical thinking and biblical thinking, because such greed creates more need in the poorer sections of society. And the accumulation of goods then becomes the focus of our success. In conclusion, the prosperity doctrine is weak. It can only be stated in a Western world, first world country, where accumulation is easier than, say, in Africa and third world countries, where you're basically eating dirt at times to fill your belly. There are a lot of things that are just wrong with it. The idea that God would intervene and create money from nothing would just collapse the whole human system, and that would create more war and more anarchy and more evil, and even that seems to be quite contradictory to how God functions. I would suggest, Rochelle, that the best way to avoid getting caught into the prosperity doctrine is to remember that we serve the Lord, and that we're to do so with contentment and a great sense of appreciation for all that we've currently got. Keep our eyes firmly fixed on Jesus, the author and perfecter of our faith, and not sidetracked by capitalistic materialism dressed in a skirt called prosperity doctrine. No matter how pretty that particular doctrine may look, at the end of the day, it's very unfaithful and always favours the rich and powerful. Thank you for your question, Rochelle. God bless.